welcome. Raise Your Inner Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game off the court. Tuesdays are for sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. The inner game plays a huge role in both, so that's what we're talking about. And the idea, again, is that we can all just use some extra comfort and encouragement and connection in these crazy-ass times. Oh, my goodness. So that's what we're here for. So how are you today? It's been so long since I asked. I'm sorry again for that, but how are things with your inner game? Feeling good, I hope? Maybe stressed out, worried? I hope not too much. What's going on for you? For me, well, it's been 9 or 10 months. Oh, God, still can't believe it's been that long since I reported. And it's interesting to note that a lot is the same. Generally, we're good, healthy, kids are good, life is pretty darn good. But a lot has happened and changed too, as you'd expect, and I imagine it's the same for you. Beautiful weather the past couple of weeks. I do love summer so much better than winter. Goodness, just lovely. It's easier, makes me happier, longer days, everything about it. I don't expect I love it enough to move away. I don't see us being snowbirds in our future, so I guess I'll just be that guy, that old cranky guy who complains about it and longs for the long warm days. So plenty to talk about today, some happy work and family items to report. The latest craziness from Trumpistan, of course we have to talk about that. The Senate contraception vote and what that means going forward. My favorite tool for staying positive and sane in crazy times. A 2-year report on using the Noom app, the weight loss app. Good news there. A great mental game challenge for the week, and a few recommendations. So we'll start with ups and downs. So what things were lifting me up this past week, and what things were pulling me down, making life harder? In the ups column for me this week, I had a couple related to work. One is that I started playing pickleball. We'll talk about that later, but I love it. It's super fun. I've also started marketing the Sports Academy training to adult rec players, in addition to youth athletes, and specifically to pickleball players. So I had my first student this week report back from taking the course, and it was just great. She's a 66-year-old woman, plays pickleball, and she said a few things that just lit me up. She said, first, she'd been hesitant to spend the money. The tuition is $250, which is not nothing, right? But now she thinks it's the best money she's spent in years. She talked about playing recently and said she played some of her best games ever, so much so that the people she was playing with noticed and commented on it. That's the best. The craziest one, she had a doctor appointment. She said she usually gets white coat syndrome, which is where your blood pressure is higher during the appointment because you're stressed out. But she practiced some of what she'd learned in the course while she was waiting and ended up having her lowest blood pressure reading ever. That was so great. It made me happy. I'm used to seeing the difference the training makes with kids, with junior athletes. Though, again, I didn't ever expect that when I wrote the book. The original material was for adults. But I do expect that now with younger athletes. For some reason, I was surprised with someone in that age range. But I really shouldn't have been. Before you know how your inner game works and how to get control over it, you don't know how to do that, no matter how young or old you are. And when you do learn how to do it, it makes a huge difference in all areas of your life. Again, no matter how old or young you are. So anyway, that was super great. In her specific case, just to hear how happy she was with the difference, and more broadly, to be reminded how helpful the material can be for people. The other plus this week, and this is more personal, but our son Peter is home from college for the summer. Great to have him home, of course. Also had a fun trip going out to pick him up. But anyway, this week, I was driving home from the store one afternoon, and I saw him walking along the sidewalk with some friends. It was him, his girlfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend. So just for fun, I pulled up next to him quietly, rolled down my window just to sneak up on him. And when he saw me, his face lit up, and he said, "Hey there," like he was genuinely happy to see me. And I just thought, what a great and lovely thing that is. My teenage son is actually happy to see me when he's out with his friends. That is really something. You can easily imagine that not being the case, right? I know it wouldn't have been for me at that age with my parents. So I was just really deeply happy about that, as you can imagine. For my downs, I think the main thing is the same one I have most every week lately, which is our messed up politics, and that's a polite way of saying it. We'll talk more about this later. But there's something especially disheartening about the dishonesty and hypocrisy and gaslighting from the GOP. It really just breaks my heart in so many ways. It's hard to point to any one thing. But this is the main gravity I'm working against lately, just a constant barrage of awfulness from the right. And it's only getting worse. The next 6 months is going to be really hard in a lot of ways, staying positive, staying focused and engaged, not getting pulled down by it all. It's going to be hard, but it's also super important. And really, it's the only option we have. You either resist the pull or it gets you and you become part of the problem. None of us wants that for ourselves or for the good of all of us. So anyway, plenty more to say about that going forward. But those are my ups and downs this week. I hope you are having a lovely summer so far, just getting started. More great things to come, and also some important work ahead. All right, next up, top stories. All right, top stories. So this week, actually last week, I guess, was the Trump conviction. I have to say, that made me so happy. It just did, on many levels. Of course, Republican response is a classic example of what I mentioned earlier about the gaslighting, etc., that's so heartbreaking and exhausting. Here's the main thing, among so many others, that bothers me the most. Our entire system of democracy, no exaggeration, relies on our legal system. We're a nation of laws, no one is above the law, and juries decide guilt and innocence beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a super high bar. Even if a prosecution is brought for bad faith reasons, like I would say is likely in the current Hunter Biden case, every expert I've heard says no one who's not named Biden would ever be charged with these facts. But even in a case like that, once you get into the courtroom, operating under rules of evidence, with both sides having a full opportunity to make their case, when the jury decides, that's it. That is a fair outcome, whether we like it or not, that we have to respect. Of course, also with the opportunity to appeal. But without those pieces, rule of law, no one above the law, respect legal jury decisions, nothing else works in a democracy. Literally, there's no ultimate authority in that case other than brute force and mob rule. So to have the highest Republican leaders in the country disparaging the process itself as rigged and corrupt and unfair and biased and weaponized, let alone that there is literally zero evidence to support any of it, it's hard for me to see how that isn't almost treasonous. They're making an active, intentional assault on the core of our system. That's the part of all this that hurts me the most. Our own leaders are willing to tear down our very system for their own small personal gain. It's just awful. But that was last week. This week, the big one for me is the Republicans in the Senate. Maybe you heard about this. But they voted down a bill that would officially protect the right to contraception, birth control pills, IUDs, all of it. Given the moves across the country since Roe was struck down and the comments of some of the Supreme Court justices that they seem open to that, Democrats wanted to make sure women have the right to birth control. Republicans voted it down. And here's the painful, funny, gaslighting part. The argument they made is contraception is already legal and protected by precedent. But that is the exact same argument they made about abortion rights before Roe was overturned. There was an attempt to make that official, to protect it in the law, and the Republicans said, no, we don't need to do that. It's already long held precedent, and then it was overturned. So the whole argument is complete bullshit. The reality is the right is coming for all of it. Abortion rights, contraception, same-sex marriage, IVF. It's not hyperbole. It's not speculation. It's happening now all across the country. I honestly can't understand it in any other way than it's just religious extremism. It's the American Taliban. And I'm absolutely serious about that. It's people with an extreme religious-based viewpoint trying to impose their beliefs on everyone else and control their behaviors up to and including overturning democracy itself and using force to do it. Again, not speculation, being actively discussed and planned for right now by the people supporting Trump. So that's the biggest piece of news for me this week, or at least the one I can think of right now. There are so many coming so fast all the time. But this is one more 5-alarm wake-up call to make sure Biden wins in November. I think he's done a great job, by the way, in his own right. And yes, I do wish he were 10 years younger, but I would vote for him even if he were 100 years older to keep Trump out of office. That guy and his followers are an existential crisis and threat for our country and the world. I really believe that. So that's it for this week. Not happy, but news frequently isn't, right? I'll try to find some good things to talk about too going forward, but this is the big one for me this week. And I'm guessing similar things going forward. All right, next up, Inner Game Gold. These are the ideas and concepts I come back to over and over to help me stay on track. I know these can get repetitive sometimes, but that's kind of the idea. They're reliable, helpful reminders. So this week, because we're talking about the intense high-gravity period we're in, I want to revisit the number one tool for resisting gravity, which is the following. My favorite Zen saying, be master of mind rather than mastered by mind. The mechanism by which stressful things pull us down and into a fear-based negative state is through our thoughts. We get triggered by something, we get pulled into our head, and we get stuck in a loop of worry and fear and negativity. It's not a sign of weakness, it's not a failing on our part, it's simply our innate wiring. It's our natural reaction to perceived threats. But it's still a real problem that honestly is the root of some of our biggest societal problems right now. We're all in this cycle, this downward spiral. And of course, that's what it means to be mastered by mind, is letting that natural reaction be in control. So the way to fix it is to interrupt that instinctive response. Just break that reaction cycle. And that is being master of mind. So that's why I love this quote this week. The most powerful thing we can do to help stay above all this negative noise coming at us is to learn this fundamental inner skill. If you haven't read the Raise Your Inner Game book, everything you need is in there. A link is here in the notes. If you play sports, you might prefer to learn the skills in that context. So check out our Raise Your Inner Game Sports Academy training. Also a link here. Either way, this is your top call to action for this high gravity period. However you do it, learn to be master of mind rather than be mastered by mind. All right, next up, raise your outer game. All right, raise your outer game. This is where we talk about the things we care about in our outer life, our health, our relationships, our finances. This week, I want to talk about the Noom app for losing weight, Noom, Noom. Way back, probably been 2 years now, I talked about this and how helpful it was to finally get what seemed like a sustainable system for losing weight. So here's the thing. I did actually gain a bit of the weight back. Typical, of course, happens to most people. Didn't gain all of it, but enough that I was feeling it and seeing it again. And that happens when I get completely off of tracking what I eat. My appetite, left to itself, will almost always have me eat more than I need, and frequently a lot more, especially if it's fats and sweets. So the way Noom works, if you don't know, among other things, is that it's just an easier way to track the calories you eat and you burn. It tells you how much you can eat per day to lose weight. My favorite feature, it gives you credit for half of what you burn. So if you mow the lawn or work out or whatever, your allowed number goes up for that day, so you can have a little more. That's really helpful over time. My ultimate goal was always to get to a point where I was in maintenance mode, meaning I would still be tracking, but I'd be allowed to eat more. I wouldn't have to be hungry so much of the time, because that's the hard part, right? But for some reason, I never got there. The first time, when I lost most of the weight, when I hit my target number, things were going so well, I thought, I'm just going to keep going and get to an even lower number. But then I blew out before I got there. The next 2 times I tried, I never quite hit my target number. And every time I dropped off, I stopped tracking, so the weight started to come back. This last time, a couple, 3 months ago now, I set a less aggressive target number so I could get there and finally see what it was like to be in maintenance mode. And the point of this long discussion is to say it is great. It seems to be working perfectly. I've been in this mode for maybe 6 weeks now, so I probably started even farther ago than that, maybe even January, February. So now I can eat more. I'm not hungry most of the time, and the weight is basically stable. And it makes sense because it tells you how much you can eat to maintain your weight, and if you stay within that, you should stay there, right? It really is great. Super happy with it, at least so far. We took a week off when we went to pick up Peter from school. It's a long road trip. Spent 2 nights in Montreal. Was not watching my intake at all, just going along with things, having fun, which is what you want to do on a trip like that, right? When I got back, the weight was up a bit as expected, but I got back on track, working within the limits. Within a few days, everything was right back where I should be. So it's super great. I highly recommend it if you are trying to manage your weight, as so many of us are. Couple things to keep in mind. The big one is that the app doesn't actually like this. It really is designed for weight loss. Once your target weight is the same as your goal weight, like you've got there, it seems to want to kick you out and get rid of you. Sort of disappointing, honestly. I suppose I get it on their part, the economics of it, I don't know. But anyway, just know that when you get to this point, you'll need to start using the app in a way that it's not really designed for. So just ignore all the messages, all the upsells. Just keep using the daily tracking and calorie counting. I guess the other piece is that you need a good way to track your calorie burn. I have an Oura ring, also an Apple Watch. Both of those connect with the app automatically so it can adjust, to your burn for the day. That's probably another essential piece of the system. But anyway, if you can work out those elements, it is by far the best and most successful thing I've ever done for this. And it just feels so great. So there you go. Outer game for this week. Noom app to lose, and most important, maintain a healthy weight. All right, next up, our charging station challenge. All right, charging station challenge. This week, I want you to practice doing something that helps you feel better about yourself, about the news, about the world in general. I know we've done this at various times before. It's not new necessarily, but it is always helpful and in a very good and timely way. It's actually one of the best things you can do at any time to put yourself into a better place. Interestingly enough, this is even something top athletes and coaches recommend to deal with the pressure of competition. So what is it? It's a gratitude exercise. Maybe you saw that coming. So the challenge for this week is, once a day, make a note to yourself if you need to, and just take a moment to reflect on what you're thankful for. And it doesn't have to be big picture things like your health or whatever. When you list things like that, you tend to stop doing the exercise because you're always saying the same thing. This week, I want you to think about things you're grateful for that happened that day. I like doing this at night when I turn off the light to go to sleep. The last thing I think about, what went great today? What am I happy about? What am I thankful for? This is a great and helpful exercise in many ways, and I especially like it as the last thing to focus on before going to sleep. Anyway, whenever you do it, that's the challenge for this week. Once a day, a couple moments, gratitude exercise. All right, next up, highly recommended. All right, these are things I'm crazy about right now. Books, shows, gadgets, or things I'm just reviewing. So this week, a few things. First, I'll mention again the Oura ring. For health tracking, it's a little expensive. I think it's around $300 now, but it seems like a great tracker. It gives excellent sleep tracking. The Apple Watch can do that, but first, I don't want to wear my watch in bed, and it's the only time I can charge it. So Apple Watch during the day, Oura at night. It's a great combination for me. For books, I haven't totally loved the books I've read lately. They're good enough, entertaining enough, but not necessarily enough to recommend. So nothing there this week. For shows, Margaret and I are watching Dark Matter on Apple TV. It's not perfect. A couple of plot points we're like, what? But it's a very intriguing premise. Science fiction, multiverse stuff. Very well done. Now, another one, this is a while ago, but another Apple TV show I loved was called The New Look. The acting alone in that one was just unbelievable. It's beautiful. Also sort of a troubling story of the French fashion industry at the end of World War II as it transitioned from being occupied to after it was liberated. I'm not into fashion like much at all, but it's a fascinating look at Nazi-occupied France, the war, creativity, all of that. It's just beautiful. One more, because it's been such a long time. Also Apple TV. It's called Drops of God. Drops of God. Margaret and Francis and I all watched that one together, which is rare, right? That we can all enjoy the same show. Again, very interesting and well done show. The premise here is there's a wine expert, sort of a jerk, with a wine collection worth over $100 million. He dies, leaves the collection to his estranged daughter, who is French, that's where he's from, but also to his Japanese protege. He'd moved to Japan, been working there for a long time. And so who gets the inheritance depends on who wins a competition he has set up. And it's just a very fascinating, hard to describe show, but really loved that one too. So I could probably go on with these if I thought about it, but that's a good amount for now. So those are my recommendations for the week. Highly recommended. So a couple final thoughts for this episode. First, I'm making a few changes in the format. Some of you may have noticed already. One I'd really like to make is to answer more of your questions. Problem is, that means I need you to ask questions. So please do send me any questions you have, really about anything related to your inner game and certainly any of the things we normally talk about. Suggestions for topics, whatever it is, I would love to hear from you, and I think it'd be a great addition to the show. So please do send me whatever questions you have. info@raiseyourinnergame.com, and thank you in advance for that. Reminder again to check out the Raise Your Inner Game book if you could use some help with your mental game, or the Sports Academy training if you play sports. Otherwise, that's it for this week. Good to be back. Hopefully we'll be able to keep the momentum going at least through the end of the year. Hope you have a great week. Keep up the good work. I will talk to you next time.